Goodness me, I seem to have offended just about everyone. Australian society inching ever closer to the elusive asymptotic boundary of peak muppet. In other words, it's high time I addressed from the comments the creme de la creme of nut de la nut. I'm John Cadogan from AutoExpert.com.au and I get new cars cheap. Australia only. Website. God. Now, another battle in the war on scientific illiteracy this week. We're going to talk about bull bars and snorkels for the beard-stroking Piscreekians among you. There's batteries and efficiency applied engineering, a whole bunch of that sort of stuff as well. But we might as well kick off with a couple of critics. First up, Toby. Or should I say Toby, because that's how he spells it. You have to be the most perfect son of a bitch in Australia. Well, thank you, Toby. Never made an error in spelling. I've been awake at night wondering whether that was a joke or not. Never say anything that cannot be taken literally. I can only hope to be perfect enough to laugh at a mistake made by someone I don't even know. You'll never get there, Toby. You, sir, are a very nice guy. I'm sure your mother is proud. Well, Toby, Mum has long since come to terms with the human being I turned into, so we need not worry too much about her level of pride or not. But, Toby, I'm a bit concerned about your mother, who can't even spell, apparently. I mean, who spells Toby with an I? I hate it when the education system leaves someone behind. Now, Martinko, Marty P, says, too much ranting for my taste. First time here, but a good info. It's hard to read these sometimes, I must say. A good info on e-power equals dirty EV. Less efficient than 20 years old Toyota's hybrid system. Shocking. Well, thank you, Marty P. Your taste. Let's address that. Your taste is obviously important to only one person in the room, Marty. You. None of us give a flying rat's ass about your taste. I know I don't. My level of ranting is just Goldilocks for me. Dude. And Nissan's e-power system, I do get some hate about those videos, mainly from people who failed the IQ test and actually bought one. Nissan's e-power system, when you take all the fluff out of it, what it is an internal combustion engine driving a generator. Yay them. One of the least efficient power transmission modes I know, and to which a whole bunch of other mouth-breathing commenters say, well, why are locomotives that way if it's so inefficient? The simple answer there is because locomotives typically transfer 2,000-ish peak horsepower to 12 wheels via 6 axles, and driving a dirty big generator to drive traction motors on each of the axles is a much more elegant solution. It's not done for energy efficiency. It's done because if you put traction motors on the axles and a generator up the bum of the diesel engine, then all you need to do is run some pretty fat cables to each one of the axles, as opposed to a fully fledged 6-axle drive mechanical transmission, which would be hideously expensive, hugely detailed and expensive to maintain, and downtime would just go through the roof. So there's kind of that, if that's your argument. And Nissan should hang its head in shame over its e-power system because it is less energy efficient than just driving the wheels with a mechanical transmission. In other words, it's a disgrace if the goal of the exercise was clean sort of energy efficiency. So there's that. Now, I had a lengthy exchange in the comments feed with a dude named Owain Bennett. OBW, let's call him. He goes, I never understood why they use water to put out electrical fires. Now, in context, okay, this is not about when the toaster burns the toast, runs into the curtains in the kitchen and then starts burning the house down. Good safety tip there. CO2 or the powder type extinguisher for electrical fires of that nature. What Owain, OBW, is talking about here is battery fires, lithium-ion battery fires. And the reason they use water for them, dude, is because water has a spectacular specific heat capacity, meaning a small amount of water can absorb a shit ton of heat. And I pointed this out to OBW, and I expected that to be the end of it, but au contraire, he goes on and goes, wouldn't foam or similar be more effective? There's supposed to be a question mark there, OBW, just saying. I understand lithium batteries make their own air and fuel during the fire, but something that can smother and not run off would be more effective. This is why scientific literacy is so important to understand these issues, right? Batteries don't make air when they go into this state of catastrophic thermal runaway. What happens is the electrolyte decomposes exothermically, so it makes heat and oxygen gas because they're all full of chemicals with O something at the end of them, phosphate, carbonate, whatever, doesn't really matter. There's a lot of locked up chemical oxygen in the electrolyte. When the battery overheats, that oxygen is liberated as oxygen gas. And the concept, therefore, of smothering a fire of this nature is ridiculous. That's what foam does, right? You spill petrol all over the ground and it catches fire, which often happens in the aftermath of a vehicle crash, like the fuel tank ruptures or there's a leak in the fuel system somewhere and you get fuel all over the road, and then there's a source of ignition and whooshka, liquid petrol burning on the road. Okay, foam is great for that because it floats on top of the petrol and it deprives the liquid petrol from access to atmospheric oxygen. We need to remember that air and oxygen are two different things. Air is only about 21% oxygen, and the vast bulk of it, like 78% of it, is relatively inert nitrogen gas. So the problem with the battery is that oxygen gas promotes combustion really energetically. And if you want to see how energetically, look up the history of Apollo 1 and how quickly the 3 astronauts died there because they were breathing pure oxygen environment at the time. So the air we're breathing now is a lot safer than anything generating pure oxygen. Idiots blow themselves up all the time when they electrolyse water if they collect the hydrogen and the oxygen together in the same container because it's a perfect stoichiometric mixture and it's ready to go bang, right? Pro tip, don't do that. It's unsafe, right? So oxygen gas is really dangerous stuff. And when the battery is going into this thermal runaway state, it's making its own. It doesn't matter what you encapsulate the fire with, you will not be depriving it of oxygen. The only thing you can do, the only way you can hope to inject a countermeasure into this terrible situation is to use water because water has the capacity to absorb a lot of heat. And if you take enough heat out of something that's burning, it stops burning. And it certainly prevents it from spreading, right? Which is why overseas in Europe, for example, they have these glorified swimming pools on the back of low loaders and they trot them round to EV fires and they pick the EV up with a crane and dunk it in the swimming pool because only water can hope to absorb that much energy. So, thought that'd be the end of it, but OBW gets back to me and goes, I understand and agree with what you are saying, just pointing out there must be something better than water. Well, dude, scientific literacy, there's not. When you look at water on a per unit volume basis, nothing else comes close in the context of its capacity to absorb heat. It's like 4.2 kilojoules per litre per degree C. So if you've got 1 litre of water and you want to make it go from 20 degrees C to 21, you need 4.2 kilojoules of energy to do that. So if you put something in water and it is burning energetically, the water has the capacity to absorb a shit ton of heat. And aren't we just fortunate in our society that water is so freaking ubiquitous? It's the only countermeasure I can think of for a battery in a state of catastrophic thermal runaway. The only other option is to just let the materials exhaust themselves and the fire goes out. The problem with that is the toxic chemicals that are released in the process and the fact that there's essentially no control of what goes downwind. And all you need to hurt yourself, especially with batteries with cobalt in them, is cobalt exposure to your skin. Heavy metal poisoning, always bad, dude. Now, a dude named A now. Guess it's a fake name anyway. That's his name on YouTube, and I'm going to call him Hole from now on for reasons which will become obvious. Mr. Hole goes on and says, forward-facing ram head snorkels are for dust, water and performance. What most people, including baseball cap-wearing old men, don't realise just how beneficial they are simply for air temperature and pressure, especially for turbos. I can see this conversation playing out 1,000,000 times a day, right on the foreshore of the Golden Billabong at Dingo Piss Creek. Beard strokers everywhere going, yeah, me snorkel, mate. Less dust, lower temperature, better engine performance, ram air effect. However, I'd suggest that Pascal and Bernoulli, the mommy and daddy of fluid dynamics, as well as Nicholas Carnot, who was kind of the Chuck Norris of thermodynamics, they're all rolling in their frickin' graves over sentiments such as this. So you beard-stroking, blue singlet-wearing piss creekians have a lot of grave spinning to answer for, in my view, because my hypothesis is that snorkels are bullshit for everything except water crossing. And dude, if you buy a Ranger or something and the water fording capacity is like 800 millimeters, do you really need to increase that? Because if you've ever driven through water deeper than that, that's properly scary. I mean, if it is flowing, you will float away. You're at the point where you're at risk of establishing at least neutral buoyancy, right? And any crossflow, you've got limited downforce on the tyres, pressure on the side with the crossflow, bye, right? See you at the estuary kind of thing. Now, on this business about being the Chuck Norris of thermodynamics, this is the headiest praise of all, and it makes me think of the other Chuck that we all know and love. Chuck Norris. The top 5 Chuck Norris jokes of all time, right? Chuck Norris never reads books. He's a highly educated man, obviously, but he never reads books. He just stares them down and waits for them to divulge the information he needs. Wish I could do that. Dinosaurs looked at Chuck Norris the wrong way once. Just saying. If Chuck Norris were a country, its principal export would be pain. Number 4, I think we're up to now. Chuck Norris was born in 1940, and since then, death by roundhouse kick has gone up by 1 billion%. Just saying. Not a coincidence. The Grim Reaper, of course, once had a near Chuck Norris moment. He was never the same again. This is a roundabout way of saying I'm right in the middle of this whole video on Chucks. Chucks like this, Chucks like this. How do you deal with them when they F up? on site. How do you pull apart a mofo like this, dude? Well, if you've ever wondered, I'm halfway through that video. I'll be showing you exactly how in due course this week. And if that's not a rock-solid reason to subscribe to this fine, diplomatic, inoffensive channel, I don't know what is. Now, to answer this question about snorkels, right, there's a few applied sciencey things you just really need to know. And then it's not a mystery anymore, and it's not a matter of stroking one's beard to a conclusion. It's a matter of relying on what got us out of caves and gave us advanced everything. Okay? So a snorkel, I would suggest, is a 2-metre-ish length of plastic or stainless steel tube which elevates your air intake from about hip height to about head height, which is what, about 600 or 700 millimeters. So what we're talking about is raising the air intake from about, I don't know, maybe headlight level to head level. What kind of a difference can that make? The snorkel is going to ask the air to change direction, okay? Because the car's going, according to you, car's coming this way, so the air is coming that way, and that means the air's got to come into the snorkel and turn a sharp 90 on the way down, and then turn another gradual 90 for a total of 180, and then come forward to the front of the guard and turn another sharp 90 into the engine bay, and then go down the track with the rest of the plumbing, okay? Now, it might surprise you to know, because it's easy to think that air's just invisible and does nothing, but air has viscosity and mass. So it really is disinclined to do both of those things, which would be flow through a tube and change direction. In fact, it really hates doing that. And the pipe is really hot because it's baking in the sun, typically in Australia, South Africa, places like that, where there's actual desert to drive through, right? I'd further suggest that air at roof level, head level, is roughly the same temperature and just as dusty as air at hip level or headlight level. There's really no difference to any of these things. Now, if the engine was sucking in hot air from like 2 inches above the black bitumen, I'd say, yeah, dude, pretty hot down there, but it's not. It's sucking air in from roughly headlight level. And the difference in temperature between here and here is insignificant to zero, particularly if there's a bit of turbulence mixing the whole thing up. So there's that. But even if there was 5 degrees of difference, and you said, well, it's a 40-degree day, 5 degrees, that's huge. That's 1/8 of the difference. It's not, dude, because when you do these calculations, you have to use the absolute temperature, and that means what we're really talking about at 40 degrees is roughly 315 degrees absolute. So we're talking about 5 degrees, which there is not that much range in between here and here. But even if we were, it's like 5 in 300, which is like 1.5%. You're freaking kidding. 1.5% in absolute temperature is going to make bugger all difference on the way into your engine, and there's nothing like that. Plus, you're asking it to flow through a really hot piece of generally black plastic. So there's that. When it's doing that, right, it's then, when it comes through your snorkel, it's going to go through all the same plumbing. It's going to go through your airbox, your air filter, then it's going to go through the inlet, through the turbo, through the intercooler, and then into your engine. And therefore, I'd suggest that the best thing a snorkel can hope to do is make absolutely no difference to anything in terms of engine operation. And at worst, it's just going to be all negative, dude, because, you know, air doesn't want to do the direction changes, doesn't want to flow through the pipe. It's being subjected to all those heat and all that heat. And the claims, those claims about dust and temperature are just uninformed bullshit. Okay, so this is how that works. I'd suggest that some baseball cap wearing old men actually studied this kind of stuff at university for years, and we had to do it like it was an extreme sport. If we didn't, we kind of didn't get a degree. That's how that worked. Every kid didn't get a medal back then. You actually had to try, right? Snorkels, therefore, are both a financial and scientific literacy test. If you buy one, of course, you fail. Now, Roger, what do we call him? What could be his Aussie nickname? I'd suggest 10-4. 10-4 says, don't forget that cell phone batteries also have lithium-ion batteries. Maybe people should reconsider charging them on their nightstand while they sleep. On the nightstand, 10-4 is fine, I'd suggest. You know, we're talking about, unless you're using a real fast charger, we're talking about USB, and USB is typically 15 to 18 watts maximum. If you're using a USB-C high power charger, then you'll be limited by the charging capacity of the phone, which is probably, 20, 25 watts, something like that. If the phone's on a hard surface, on a nightstand, it should be fine. The real danger is if you're, lying in bed like this after having 57 beers, surfing your way through the latest instalment of nunswithbighooters.com or something, and then you fall asleep and you thrash around a bit, one of your spare pillows goes over the top of your phone on the charger, then that's a frickin' disaster waiting for a place to happen, isn't it? Because then you've got the heat energy going into the battery and you've essentially just put it in a dirty big insulating container, so the heat's got nowhere to convect away to, and that could be a great way of burning yourself to death in bed. So nightstand, phone charging, tablet, whatever, just fine, but not in bed on the charger. Dude, let's try and be responsible there. Now, Glenn Aston. What would be his rap name? Asti. I think I had one of those once in America, in the South. Yeah, I'll have a nice Asti, please, my good man. Word of Darwinian warning. I recently put my Samsung S22 Ultrabucks phone in a waterproof flotation pouch after another mate dispatched his to Davy Jones's locker. I also left it on the car dash while retrieving the boat. Thankfully, the phone safety switch kicked in. I could have had a dark tinge to the Hilux. And we could have all had one less Hilux towing something really, really heavy between us and where we actually wanted to get to at a reasonable speed uphill. So there's that. But yeah, you got to be careful about unintended consequences of doing seemingly simple things around systems with lots of energy. Like, no matter how mundane this kind of stuff seems, the best thing to do with your phone when you get out of a vehicle is have it in your pocket or your bag, and have your bag with you, because then it can't bake in the sun and Roman candle the shit out of an otherwise perfectly serviceable day of boating or piss creaky and aluminium box effluent towing. Dan Cunningham now, who I will henceforth refer to as Lingus. You're welcome, Dan. Lingus says, during the hotter months, I tend to put my depleted Ryobi 18-volt and 36-volt batteries in the front of the garage fan to cool down before whacking on the charger. Oh man, I hope that's not in public view. Nobody wants to see you whacking on your charger, or however else you would like to refer to this practice. A few tradie mates, I don't know why he's changed voices, but he has. A few tradie mates I've talked with actually put their batteries in the camp fridges with their 4x4 masturbation chariots. It's URB, Lingus. You and your charger whacking, I thought you'd know that. Anyway, to cool down for a few minutes if they've been run hard. They've all experienced a battery fire because of whacking directly on charge after use when hot. So, you're in a club of sorts, are you? Charger whacking club. Please let me know where the next meeting is so I can absolutely fail to be there. It's been a case of learn from the mistakes of others in my case. Lesson well learned, I reckon. Well done, Lingus. We'll consider that to be a PSA. Power tool batteries, when hot, particularly when being used on something with a lot of drain, not so much a driver like this, but an air blower or something that runs hard and continuously and flattens the battery quickly, good idea to leave the battery to rest in a cool, shady place before you stick it on the charger. You're welcome. Fire and rescue agencies around the world are saying, yeah, good idea. Thanks for the message. Philip now. P-Dog says, I am also a mech engineer with a 4x4. Well, I feel your pain, P-Dog. All that bleeding from the ears endlessly at university. Laplace, like who thought of Laplace? Obviously Laplace did. And Fourier, what a cock. Just saying, all these advanced mathematical things that you never use after you leave university, that you have to suffer through. I don't understand either of those things, but I learnt how to do it. That's the main thing. For years I've been trying to convince my friends that bull bars are not a good idea. Yeah, because P-Dog studied physics, so he knows. Most have no understanding of what crumple zone means and how controlled deceleration will affect what happens to you in an accident. The only caveat I'd put on that statement is they're not accidents, dude, they're crashes. Accidents are events without apparent causes. You can be the King of England by accident, an accident of birth. Look whose womb I popped out of, kind of thing. But you can't crash a car by accident. That doesn't happen, okay? Only to experience much derision about that I am crazy. You're not crazy, dude. You just know stuff that other people don't know. It's a living hell. You walk around in this state of constant perplexedness over how many dumb shits there are in society. It's terrible. Finally, I have some external evidence. Thanks heaps. Well, I'm glad I helped you with your pain, P-Dog. Look, I've spoken to a lot of engineers, particularly engineers in the car industry, in the R&D space and things of that nature, and none of them will go on the record, but they all say that bull bars can be either zero effect or bad, but they can't improve your safety in a serious life-threatening crash. So if you are miraculously gifted as an engineer, then maybe you could design a bull bar that did not affect your safety in a crash. But every other bull bar which is imperfectly designed is only going to be bad. And it could be insignificantly bad or really significantly bad. But you don't want that when your life is at risk. And people go, oh, I don't care about that. I don't want to damage me radiator if I hit one of the things on the coat of arms, kind of thing. And I'd suggest that's just a case of really mismanaging the priorities. And there is no statement of which I am aware from any major bull bar manufacturer in Australia or around the world where they have done a regulatory style compliance crash test with a bull bar in the car and without, like a 64 kilometre an hour offset frontal crash test with bull bar and without. Or maybe they have, and they just looked at the results and said, fuck me dead, dude, we've got to bury this and hope it never leaks. Because that's what we're talking about here. Now, Raffin says, I had my PSI at 33. However, when I checked 2 days later, all of them showed around 44 PSI. How is that possible? What could be the reason? Please help. I had checked when the tyres were cold, brackets early morning. Okay, is that both early morning or just one? Because people make altogether too much of a deal about this cold inflation business with tyres, right? The main problem with tyres out there on the road, and you see it all the time if you're a tyre train spotter like me, because for my sins, I did all those Wheels magazine tyre tests all those years ago, and we got a whole bunch of engineers from the tyre industry together and talked about operational issues with tyres and testing protocols and scientific control and all of that boring shit that's just in an effort to try and make test results meaningful. And I learned a few things, right? I learned that if you get direct competing tyres from direct competing premium manufacturers, it's bloody hard to measure the difference between the performance of those tyres. I'm tripping over my tongue. We must be at number 9. We are. Nearly there. So, temperature is not that big a deal. The real operational issue with tyres is the fact that the service interval on cars is like 12 months, and that's roughly when some people's tyres get checked. And that's fine if you've got a perfectly hermetically sealed tyre, which none of them are, but if you're losing just this much air a week, over 52 weeks, that's significant loss. So a lot of people are driving around with one or more tyre dangerously underinflated, and we need to cure that. And some people, I'm sure, would go, oh, it says only do it cold, and it's lunchtime and we've been driving for 2 hours, whatever. Just do it. Doing it hot is better than not doing it. So, if you're at 15 degrees, say, cold inflation pressure, and then the operation of the tyre goes up to 25, the difference is only going to be like 1.5 psi. And if you're at 15 degrees and it's a bit warmer, like spring or autumn in Sydney or something, and the tyre goes up to 35 degrees C from 15 first thing in the morning at Le Fart de Sparrow, then we're talking about 3.5 psi, which is not enough to worry about. You got to check the pressure. Now, in Rafi's case, to achieve 44 psi just by temperature rise, hypothetically, the tyre would have to be operating at about 80 psi, which I suspect it would fail before then. There's no way I can see it would get that hot in normal operation because it's moving quite fast through air, and the air is not going to be anything like 80 degrees C, so there's a lot of forced convection. So to be at 44 psi is kind of impossible, and the only cause for this is, that I can foresee at least, is some failure in the test that's been done. So you've used a different appliance to measure the pressure. Maybe you've used the dodgy pressure gauge at the servo. So 33 on servo pressure gauge is roughly equivalent to 44 back at home, or with a reasonably accurate, consistent gauge that you've got in the glove box or something of that nature. I don't see any other way, short of Harry Potter and waving his wand around in public again, that a tyre can go from 33 to 44 with experimental controls at the same temperature. And even if you heat it up, it's impractical to heat it up hot enough to get the tyre that much pressure increase, right? It's just not going to happen. Pro tip, if you put your hand on anything and you can't kind of leave it there, the point of discomfort is for most people about 60, 65 degrees C. So if you can put your hand on the tyre and you can kind of leave it there for several seconds, then the tyre is cooler than that. Incidentally, if you do those calculations, you have to use the absolute pressure. So you have to add 1 atmosphere to the tyre pressure readings, because tyre pressures are gauge pressure, which is pressure above 1 atmosphere. Because obviously, when the tyre's reading 0, the air in it is at 1 atmosphere, like the stuff you're breathing now. And you also have to use the absolute temperature, which is the temperature in degrees C plus 273. And you have to know the mathematics, which is another reason why you really do need to make sure that, even if you're not, you need to make sure that kiddies have at least vestigial high school level scientific literacy, because otherwise they're just going to spend their lives being bullshit to by marketing departments. Now, finally, Rhino Opperman. Rhino, what an awesome name. I'm just going to call him Horny O. You can be called Jackie O, you can be called Horny O. So Horny O says, I saw your latest video and again heard the joke regarding Prado. I have also heard other Aussie channels make the same jokes. I was just wondering, where is this coming from? The Land Cruiser Prado came from the Land Cruiser 100 series, which was replaced by the Land Cruiser 200 and the predecessor for the Land Cruiser 120, 130, 150, aka Prado. The same platform is used on the FJ Cruiser and the USA 4Runner. None of the above vehicles are seen as soft-cock 4x4 vehicles. I did call Prado the softcock Land Cruiser. I did. Guilty, Your Worship. So why in Australia is the Prado seen as a chick car? It seems if you put a FJ body on it, it is amazing. Not really. But put a Land Cruiser 152 Prado body on it and it is a chick/softcock car. Is it because it has a name on it? Should it rather have been called Land Cruiser 150, like the Land Cruiser 200? It's actually called Land Cruiser Prado. Land Cruiser Softcock was too long to fit on the tailgate. Apologies for the long email, just trying to make sure I explain the questions correctly. Kind regards, Hornio. Now, it pains me to point out to otherwise apparently oriented to time and space adult humans that some of the things I say from time to time are satire. They're jokes, dude. They're not meant to be hurtful. They're just meant to be a little bit of a dig. Like in Australia, verbally, we get our mafia murder weapons out and we just gently stick them in our mates from time to time. How's your softcock cruiser going? Kind of thing. We all do it. It's the Australian way. Now, I don't see any harm in that because if you can't have a little joke at everything, then life is a pretty drab place. And this is one of the problems with the information age, the fact that we can all take offence so easily at everything that is said. And I'm not suggesting that Hornio in the bin over there is taking offence. He's actually genuinely trying to understand why I would call such a beautiful vehicle a softcock Land Cruiser. And I would do that because it's just a joke. And it's almost like fishing for me. It's like, we'll put some bait on the line and we'll just see if someone bites. And thankfully, Hornio, you did. So my work here is done. I don't get the sense, however, that anybody was genuinely outraged at this slight on the softcock Land Cruiser. That's a bit disappointing, I suppose, but it's so easy in the modern age to just interpret anything in the worst possible context. Like none of us online give anyone else the benefit of the doubt. They don't go, oh, maybe he'd had a few beers, which is not the case here, or maybe he didn't actually mean that. Maybe there was some imperfect transmission between the thought and the text on the tweet or whatever, right? Nobody does that. Everyone jumps straight from what's being said to hell on earth as we know it. And I really think we need to spend more time giving each other online the benefit of the doubt the way we would in genuine conversation. Because, look, if you buy a Prado, I actually think Prado is a bit of an indefensible shitbox, but if you buy a Prado and you love it, then I'm happy for you. You know, I'm happy that you're in love with your softcock Land Cruiser, and I hope it serves you well, and I hope you're significantly mature that you can have a bit of a giggle at that and then poke some shit on me because, hey, I got my head up above the trench, and some would say up my ass as well in America. And, you know, that's one of the beauties of not taking the whole thing too frickin' seriously. And if only a whole bunch of people online could realise that lightening up is its own reward, then I think the online space would just be a better place to inhabit more regularly.